Hello BookTube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome back to my channel, Books and Books. I have a tag for you today. The month of August is coming to an end, so it's time for me to do the GarbAugust Trashy Book tag. It was created, of course, by Criminali, and I was tagged by one of the hosts of GarbAugust, Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads, or for this month, Another Boobyphile Reads Playboy for the articles. So I will leave links to both of their channels in the description box below. The questions are, number 1, trashy books are often dismissed by the critics. What's a book which is regarded as trash which you think has artistic value? I don't read that much trash, so I cannot say that I've read something that is modern, that is recent, and that is currently considered trash and that I think has artistic value. I'm going to have to go to the past, to a book that when it was published was considered trash and that today is considered a classic, and that is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. And it could be any book by Alexandre Dumas because he was considered as a writer of pulp fiction, or what pulp fiction was at the time in the 19th century. His work was not considered as valuable. It was considered as commercial trash. And even though he is one of the most read authors of the 19th century and has remained so, it was only in 2002 that he was admitted to the Pantheon. The Pantheon is a place in Paris where famous men, mainly some women, are buried. So men and women famous in the field of arts and science, mainly. So mainly, I think also politics, but very little. Mainly arts and science. And writers are the most represented people in the Pantheon, I'm pretty sure of that. And it took a long time for Dumas to be admitted, even though everybody reads his books. And yeah, he was admitted only in 2002. So I think it is wonderful, The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers, and quite a few of his books. Some of them are trash, I admit. Some of them are not very good. But The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers, they are wonderful. They are masterpieces in their genres. Number 2, critics often love books with extreme or challenging content. Which critically praised book did you think was trash? That's a book I read last year or this year? Last year for, well, it wasn't May of the Moderns last year. It was hosted by Katie from Books and Things, but it was the same idea. Books published between 1900 and 1950. And I read The Immoralist by André Gide. And that book was considered great for a long time. André Gide won the Nobel Prize, so he is a very much admired writer. However, I believe The Immoralist is trash. It is the story of a man who grew up in a quite privileged family. Not super privileged, but rather privileged. He had land. He could have lived off the money from the land. However, he got married to please his father, and after that just found excuse after excuse to live a very selfish life. And eventually he lost everything. And part of his very selfish life was to travel to various places around the Mediterranean to spend time with boys. It's not written in so many words, it's really in the subtext, but that's what we have to understand, that this man is attracted to boys. And the difference between, let's say, Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov and The Immoralist by André Gide is that André Gide was himself a pedophile. It is quite known that he traveled abroad and that his personal tastes brought him to teenage boys. So there's something absolutely crappy and disgusting in that book. I know a lot of people say we have to differentiate, to separate the artist from the work. But in that case, when it's auto-fiction, basically, we can't. It's not possible to differentiate, to make a separation between the private life of the author and the work. It's a piece of trash. So that's my answer. Next question. Let's keep this happy. Question 3. Not everyone approves of trashy books. What's a book you wouldn't read in public? Well, now we have like electronic readers. We can hide what we read. There are not that many books that I would be ashamed of reading in public because my tastes are not really to trashy books, naturally. I don't read necessarily cheap science fiction or cheap horror or cheap romance, even that. But I wouldn't be ashamed of reading them in public. One that a sort of book that would make me blush if I was caught reading that in public would be celebrity gossip. I wouldn't read tabloids in public. If I go to a cafe, let's say an old-fashioned, very old-fashioned cafe, where there would be a whole bunch of printed newspapers, including the tabloids, I wouldn't reach for the tabloids, even though I would want to. I would be interested in the gossip, but I wouldn't reach for that. I would go for the Times or something like that. So yeah, celebrity gossip, somewhere out there. I think it's because I like it too much. I try not to follow that, and says the person who has watched basically every minute of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial in May. Yeah, I could easily fall into a trap of following that way too much, so I sort of hold myself back and I don't read too much celebrity gossip. I have to admit that in book format, there's not that much of it, because books tend to take time before they are published, so they are out of date by the time they are published. So gossip is more on the internet and in newspapers. But yes, celebrity gossip, I don't read that in public. Question number 4. Books about killer animals are almost always trashy. What animal would you least like to be attacked by? I think that's a trick question, because if I say tigers, well, there are no tigers in Canada, so I'm wasting my answer. So if I say, okay, bears, well, there are no bears close to where I live. They are in the forest and I don't go there. So that's another wasted answer. So how about dogs? Well, dogs, they are held in leashes. They're not that dangerous. They are trained generally. So my answer would be squirrels. Squirrels! I cannot go on my balcony without starting a staring contest with a squirrel. They are everywhere. They live in the trees, they live under the balconies, they live everywhere they can find. And it used to be that in Ottawa that there are black squirrels and gray squirrels, and they used to have their territories. They wouldn't mix with one another. They would, they would have separate territories and quite distant. And now, just in the 2 trees in front of where I live, there is one that is occupied by a black squirrel and another one by a gray squirrel. So that means they are starting to unite. They are finally understanding that they can scare humans away. And also, squirrels are a bit like rats, but they don't have the same intelligence. So I think it would take a very long time for a band of squirrels to finally kill a human being, because they wouldn't know how to go at it. They wouldn't go for the jugular. So I think it would be just small little bites, very painful for a very long time. So squirrels, that's my answer. Question number 6. 6 or 5? 5, sorry. Trashy books often flourish in specific genres. What's your favorite trashy subgenre? Well, I mentioned gossip. I have a weakness for royal gossip from the House of Windsor. I may have read one for GarbAugust. We'll know in the next video. And other than that, I would say in romance, not all romance is garbage, but if we go like underneath, there are some romances that are more spicy with more explicit sex scenes, so perhaps that would be something that I read a bit more. Not that I necessarily go for it, and I wouldn't count erotica in there, because erotica is something else. So romance, really the love story, but with explicit sex scenes in there. I guess that would be my, what's the question? My favorite, favorite subgenre. Question 6. Famous people love to milk their fans by publishing books. Which celebrity would you like to read a trashy novel by? I've thought about that for a little bit, and then I started reading a book that sort of gave me the answer. That's the book that I'm reading. This is not for GarbAugust. It is a very good quality book, a non-fiction book. However, the answer is there. I would like, I don't know, perhaps maybe if he did, to read a trashy book written by Emeritus Pope Benedict XVI. The current Pope would do too, but I think the older one, the previous one, it would be even more interesting. Because to be Pope, in my opinion, to be the head of a church who claims to have a higher knowledge of human soul, should know the darkest corners of the soul. So they should be able to go into the depths the thing inside us that make us want to read trashy books. Because trashy books, they are very often about things that are completely contrary to religion, Christian religion, Catholic religion. They are about violence, murders, and things like that. They are about sex for sex, not for reproduction. They are about extraterrestrials, which are not supposed to exist in a world where the earth is the center of the universe, or the creation of God, or whatever you want to call it. So it would be interesting to see how Pope Benedict XVI would write a trashy book. Where would he go? What theme would he choose? Would he lose himself in meanderings about the nature of God, the nature of belief, the nature of this or that? Or would he be able to go for just a whole bunch of people that are getting shot or people having sex or whatever? So I would be very curious to read a book written by a pope, particularly Benedict XVI, a trashy book. I'm sure that would be great. Question number 7. Trashy books have the best covers. Which book on your shelves has the trashiest cover? I don't have books with trashy covers. I have very few trashy books, and most of them I read electronically, so on my shelves there's nothing with a trashy cover. However, I am reading a book currently which is not trashy at all, but one of the chapters, the chapters start with a picture, and one of them is very, very trashy. It is this. I don't know if you can see, but that's a swan doing it with a woman. And that swan is supposed to be Zeus, so a shifter. And that woman is the mother of Helen of Sparta, or Helen of Troy. And that picture is taken from a wall in Pompeii. So that is trash. Imagine having that in your bedroom, a swan doing it. Yep, that's the best that I've got on my shelves. Question number 8. Trashy books often contain adult themes. What's a book you read before you were old enough to? That would be Endless Love by Scott Spencer. It's not so much that I was shocked by the content, it's that I was reading it for information. That book is about an endless love. It's about a young man who's clearly crazy. He has an obsession for a girl, and in the early parts of the book, the boy and the girl, they have a normal relationship, and that includes having sex. And I read it, I think I was about 13 years old, and I remember reading these scenes, which were not as explicit as what you find in a book of erotica, or even a romance book, a modern romance book. They have more details than that. But it was still detailed enough that there was information for me to gather. And I remember that I learned the word diaphragm from there. I looked it up in the dictionary to know what it was. And basically the dictionary said something like contraceptive device. And it really didn't help me. So I remember being very frustrated at sort of sensing that there was all sorts of interesting things written on the page, but I couldn't quite understand them. So I guess I should have read that. A couple of years later, everything would have been clear. Question number 9. If you were a character in a shifter romance, what creature would you want you or your partner to shift into? A swan is not the answer. I don't have an answer for that. I haven't read any shifter romances, so I don't know how they work. So I don't know how to make a choice. Sandie from Miss Reads a Lot, in her version of the tag, she gave quite an interesting answer, and she answered dragon because she read a series of shifter romance where it was about dragons, and it seemed to be quite interesting. So I'm going to steal her answer and say dragon, and it sounded useful. It sounded good. And finally, the last prompt is to tag some people. But because GarbAugust is coming to an end, I'm not going to tag anyone. And also, I think a lot of people have been tagged, and I'm not necessarily comfortable tagging people, telling them, asking them in what they would like to shift. So I'm going to say, if you participated in GarbAugust and you haven't done the tag, consider yourself tagged. And that's it for me. I will give you an update on what I have read for GarbAugust in my next video, I assume. It's not filmed yet. I don't plan these things. I don't know. I assume it's the next video. And that's it. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you in the next video. À la prochaine!